difficult to do that. One of the things the Township Code requires you to do is provide for public safety. So it's your obligation as a township government to make sure that there is fire protection in your community. We've spent some time trying to figure out ways, and everybody's looking for ways to encourage volunteers and keeping volunteer firefighters alive, mostly because the state fire commissioner has said, look, if all the volunteers go away, and we have to go to a paid fire service, because that is the option. That is what we would have to do. The cost of providing that paid fire service in Pennsylvania would be $8 billion with a B dollars. That's a lot of property tax. So there's a lot of effort to make sure that we try and help incentivize volunteer firefighters. And are there any firefighters here? Does anybody know any firefighters? Okay, so let me suggest to you that firefighters are strange people. And I say that, and I was PEMA director, I used to say that when all the firefighters sit in the room too. And I say that because, if you think about it, their behavior is strange. It's not normal. I mean, when a building's on fire, what do you all do? We run out. Well, they run in. And I think that qualifies that for strange behavior. But I mean, we need folks who do that. And we need to try and find folks to do that and try and incentivize folks to do that. So the legislature came up with a volunteer local tax credit program. It is entirely optional for municipalities if you want to do it. We worked with the state fire commissioner and other local government associations to come up with a sample ordinance. There's a copy out there on the table if anybody's interested in doing it, along with some guidelines. It would take effect in 2018. You work with the fire chief to determine criteria. It can be 20% of their property tax for the municipality. To be clear, if you want to do this, be clear when you're talking to them, they don't think it's their school taxes, because it's not the school, it's not the county. So it can be on the property tax, and it can also be on the earned income tax as a flat amount. So if anybody's interested in exploring that, look, I don't think that makes anybody, you're going to give them a 20% reduction on the township property tax, for less than $100. I don't think that makes people run into a burning building. But it may help keep people who are already doing it. There's a tremendous amount of volunteer hours that have to go into training and fundraising. So to the extent that we all as municipal governments can help finance that, it's a positive venture. Legislation complying with the Real ID Act. PennDOT is in the process of making new ones, but their legislature has got it so there's going to be 2. So if you want to get the Real ID one, you can. The extension expired yesterday, but Homeland Security has granted a waiver until June 22nd, or I'm sorry, January 22nd of 2018. So if you're flying anywhere, the other option is to get a passport. If you're flying anywhere between now and January 18th, you will not need to get a passport. A couple acts they did that just quickly, you'll look at these and say, this isn't any change. And it's not. It explains how vacancies, when a vacancy occurs, when you accept the resignations. This has been common practice, but the court said that the law or the statute was not especially clear, so that there were attempts to amend it. We amended the statute to make it very clear. Steer Clear Act. If you see emergency vehicles, everybody's supposed to move over a lane so not to endanger the first responders. Selling township property, they raised the threshold from $1,000 to $2,000 if you want to dispose of personal property without bidding or the need for legal advertisement. So that's to give you a little more flexibility in selling property. Did an act to allow law enforcement, if they're wearing body cams or recording, that they no longer have to announce to the person that you're recording them. Because there was instances where you were in pursuit or going in and you didn't have time necessarily to do that. So that this is now allows them to go in to make audio recordings as they're doing searches in homes without, if they have obviously a warrant in private residences, without doing the announcements. Sewage Facility Act was amended to allow for alternate on-lot systems. This also was making clear the supervisor cannot hold any other elected township office, but can be appointed as long as it wasn't prohibited by township code. Again, this is not new, this is just clarifying language. So some legislation that's out there that they're still talking about. One is the state budget. Can you imagine if, and your legislators will be here a little bit, but can you imagine if you did at the township, like what if you said, we're just going to pass the spending plan, we're not going to figure out how to pay for it, and or even beyond that, on December 31st, you don't do a budget. What if you didn't do it till like May? What would happen? I mean, you can't do it. I mean, it was in Fulton County the other day, and somebody said, if we all went to Harrisburg, and I truly believe this is the case, if we took 253 township supervisors to sit in Harrisburg, I think the budget would get done, because you all have what they seem to. You all have common sense, but and that is a little bit more rare as you move into that capital city. You couldn't do it. So the budget is hanging out there. One of the proposals was out there was to pay for state police. This association position from the conferences has always been that people pay income tax, that's what you get. You get state police coverage for part of your income tax, along with a whole bunch of other state services. If in your community you want to have an additional level of police coverage, you can put that on. And if your residents want a faster response time, you can put a local department on. But if you're comfortable with the state police, then that's a level that you're okay with. So this was, the governor proposed a $25 fee, which is dramatically cheaper than the old $156 for every man, woman, and child. But they also acknowledged it was just the starting point, and that it would go up. So our concern was that this not be something that would be foisted just on communities that didn't have state police. As we were going through some of the testimony, one of the things that we discovered, and everybody was saying, well, the communities that aren't paying they're getting free state police coverage. Well, you may have 3 or 4 or 10. You don't get a lot of call-outs. So we were looking, and somebody said, well, what if you just paid for each response? So well, that's a little more fair. But then we looked, and the municipality, there's a municipality in the eastern part of the state called the City of Philadelphia that has the largest municipal police department in Pennsylvania with 5,500 full-time officers. They used the state police 36,000 times last year. They wouldn't have to pay. So everybody, the community uses it for 10 times, would have to pay, every resident would have to pay, but the City of Philadelphia would use it 36,000 times, and they wouldn't have to pay for it. So that didn't seem to pass the fairness test either. One of the things that did was an idea of contracting for state police services. And the community could enter into a contract. This is a Senate bill, Senator Ward from Western Pennsylvania, that the state police would establish a rate of contract for services. They could enforce local ordinances. They would effectively become your local police department. They would stay on the state payroll. It would not affect the state complement, so that they would still have other officers. And if there was ever a state emergency, they would revert back to state control for the period of that emergency. There's discussion about municipal pension reform, trying to level the playing field as it relates for police in particular. There's supposed to be a bill introduced in the next 2 weeks. We've not seen what the content of that is. Arbitration reform, one of the things that, some of these things are kind of common sense, you would think, but I would draw your attention to the second one. We've advocated that the arbitration board have to require a community's ability to pay before they make an award. Now that just seems like common sense. But that's not the way it is right now. So the way it is right now, and we look to the city of Scranton, they have arbitration awards that have absolutely crushed the municipality, and the arbitrator said, well, just raise taxes. You have the authority to raise taxes. Well, the tax base is limited, people have left. They have now sold every single asset they have. They've sold their water system, they've sold their parking garages, they've sold their municipal building. They sold everything there is to sell, and they're leasing it back, so they're making debt payments, and their pension fund is now 50% funded. I think the legislature is working to try and make sure, try and put back in the local share for communities that are getting that. There's also discussion as to whether or not there would be an expansion of gaming in the budget scenario. The House favors video gaming terminals, maximum of 5 machines per restaurant. The Senate favors mini casinos, which would allow the current casinos to open up new sites in other parts of the state. The mini casinos do not have a local share. The video gaming terminals do have a local share. So from a local government perspective, there was a funding stream that was attached to the video gaming terminals. It is unclear which, if either, of those would be included in the final budget. Legal advertising. Local governments, this will allow you to publish legal notices electronically, either on your website or on a community website, or one run by the State Office of Open Records. This right now is not allowed. I mean, obviously the newspaper publishers think this is a bad idea. I would draw your attention to just Dauphin County alone. I mean, any of your colleagues from Dauphin County. Well, Harrisburg is the only state capital in America that doesn't have a daily newspaper. Now, lately that might be a good thing, but they don't have one. So when any community in Dauphin County wants to advertise, they've got the Harrisburg Patriot, now that prints on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays, is considered weekly. So they've got to advertise, you know the drill, in weeklies. You got to advertise for 2 weeks. So they've effectively doubled the amount of advertising they have to do. And by the way, when the Patriot went from 7 days a week to 3 days a week, they didn't adjust their advertising rates. So they've effectively doubled how much it costs you to have to do those advertisements. The thought is that newspaper circulations are dropping, and you can actually get a wider exposure and a wider distribution with the internet posting or electronic posting. Penn State did a survey just to illustrate how much money was being spent on advertising. So Pennsylvania only, local governments only, public meeting notices only. So not any construction projects, not any personnel actions, not any bidding, nothing. Just meeting notices for local governments alone in Pennsylvania. How much money is spent in the year? $23 million. Just for meeting notices. Now, I'm pretty sure everybody in this room has a little bit better idea how to spend your piece of that $23 million than getting it to the newspapers. And many of the newspapers now have online versions, because that's where they're getting their readership as well. But they would also still want to charge it. So this is an attempt to try and give you the option of having electronic advertising. Right to know law reform, good bill, nice law passed probably 8 years ago now. But there's been some things that over the time you've all learned need some fine tuning. The commercial requests that you get, where vendors from other parts of the country are calling, asking you to make photocopies of all kinds of stuff effectively having the taxpayers finance their marketing campaign because you're doing all the research for you. This proposal would allow for a differential rate to be charged for commercial requests. This is not, everybody's for transparency, everybody's for sharing information, but this is not to take, this doesn't take any of that away, it just allows you to charge extra for commercial requests. It would protect some of the bank account numbers. That you would not have to disclose those. In the first round, and you may have read it in the newspapers here, the Cumberland County Redevelopment Authority responded to an open records request, had to produce copies of their checks. They did that, and 2 weeks later, their account was hacked, and they lost $253,000 because their routing number and their account number was on the check. Now, their insurance covered that, but that's kind of a good reason to not have to show your account information in these open records requests. One of the other things in the current law, everybody thought that when the law was passed, the biggest users would be the news media, would be wanting to find things out. Anybody have a guess on who the biggest users of the open records law are? Prison inmates. Make more requests of the open records law than anybody else in the state. Prison inmates. And Yeah, so granted, they got a little time on their hands. And they probably have pencils and papers and a law library that we paid for. And they ask things like, what are the staffing patterns on weekends? Well, why do you think they need to know that? Or how about when they ask, what is the delivery schedule for pharmaceuticals in the infirmary? Why do you think they want to know that? I mean, there's not a lot of good reasons. So this new proposal would put some restrictions on what prison inmates can ask for. There's a proposal to adjust the amount, increase the amount of money for roads on the state turnback program to index it to inflation. This was making clear that residency for township officials, if you were in the military, that you could still be a supervisor. We had up in the northeastern part of the state, a township supervisor who is active duty, was in Afghanistan, and he attends his meetings by Skype. And it was time to run for re-election, and they were saying he wasn't eligible to run because he doesn't live here right now. He's not here. Well, he's in Afghanistan. This would make clear that if you're active duty in the military, you remain a resident of that municipality during your active duty status. Another bill to adjust if there's no bids that are received after bidding twice, you can move ahead and engage with the vendor without that. Another bill for intergovernmental cooperation to say that you can do those agreements by resolution instead of work by ordinance. That just lowers the cost a little bit. A bill to increase auditors' compensation from $10 an hour to $15 an hour. Any auditors here? So auditors should not get their hopes up because the likelihood of Harrisburg and this is helpful for the ambulance squads for basic and advanced life support. Third-party agencies instructing for UCC inspections. There's two bills, both of which would put an additional burden on townships. If you have a current provider, the House bill requires that you have to contract with 2 providers. The Senate bill requires you have to contract with 3 providers. The critics are saying that this will allow for builders to shop for the vendor or the inspector that they want to have. We think that municipalities have the ability to do this without being mandated to engage in additional contracts. The proposal to increase countywide tax collections, still not for property tax, but would include any of the other taxes, local services, amusement, gross receipts, business privilege, occupational assessment, per capita, what have you. That's in the Senate Appropriations Committee. Nothing has happened with that. Wireless broadband, as the PUC has granted these DAS, distributed antenna systems. They're small 10-foot tall towers to help increase broadband capacity. The industry wants to have those not have to go through municipal approval. And they effectively, the PUC has said they are not public utilities. That's now in court, so we're going to court to make sure that local governments continue to have a say on where those antennas are placed. There is legislation also that would make a statewide preemption from local zoning for any of the antennas. We will oppose that for wireless facilities, in part because the way the legislation is written, it will include both the small 10-foot towers, but also include towers up to 150 feet, and that the industry would be able to come in and put those anywhere they want without regard to any local safety concerns, and we just think that's wrong. So we'll both fight that at the state level as well as the federal level with the FCC and comments we've put in place there. There's a law proposal to change the TMDL credits to allow you to buy them through a competitive bidding process. This was being done down in Lancaster County. We think as we look through it, it becomes an unfunded mandate on municipalities. And while there is the proponents are saying the bidding will save money, it makes the municipalities the buyer. So yes, it'll be cheaper than what it would have been, but it forces you to still have to do it, to have to pay for it. Do you have any questions?